Today I have a very interesting cemetery tour to bring you. I am in the very small community of Burnwell, Kentucky. And those of you who are familiar with the Hatfield and McCoy feud, and perhaps you're not, there was a forbidden romance between Johnse Hatfield and Roseanna McCoy that brought a lot of strife to the already feuding families. Well, they did have a child, and today we are on the side of a hill here in Burnwell, Kentucky to visit the grave of that child. So today we're going to be visiting a very key member of the Hatfield and McCoy feud, the child of Johnse Hatfield and Roseanna McCoy. Today we are in the very small, tiny community of Burnwell, Kentucky, which is located in Pike County, Kentucky, to visit the grave of Sarah Elizabeth, otherwise known as Little Sally. She was the child of Johnse Hatfield and Roseanna McCoy. So today we want to pay our respects to this little child and make our way to the McCoy Cemetery here in Burnwell. You can see here, this is on the side of a hill, and these steps were very much appreciated in making the visit, and there were about 130 steps that takes you to the top of the mountain here in Burnwell, Kentucky, to visit the grave of Little Sally. And again, just another look at how, there are a lot of steps here going up to the top, but this child was definitely one of the most talked about parts of the Hatfield McCoy feud. The McCoy Cemetery, in which we're visiting, I do want to say this as well. I am sure, because the McCoy name, the Hatfield name are still names that you will see a lot of, and they were big families, so I'm sure there's more than one McCoy cemetery. Actually, I know there is, and if you stick with me to the end of the video, there's a few sites I want to show you as some bonus sites of the famous locations of the Hatfield McCoy feud. So please stick with me to the end of the video. There are some things I want to show you. Now, very much a part of Kentucky tradition, especially in the country, and I've touched on this before, these cemeteries are they're on tops of hills, on tops of mountains. That's just how it goes. This stone here does tell a little bit about how Little Sally came to be. Johnse Hatfield, Roseanna McCoy were at an election day celebration when they met initially. Now, election day in Kentucky back in those days in the country, it was an all-day event, a big event, and there were celebrations on election day, and it's just something that happened. So they met, and it just so happens that about the time they met was about the time this feud really kicked into high gear. And I'm showing you some sites of the cemetery. There are very few marked gravestones in here. We're going to take a look at a few of those, but right now, just some of the views of the cemetery. I want to give you kind of a general layout. And now we're going to visit the grave of Sarah Elizabeth, otherwise known as Little Sally, daughter, and you can see right there, 1881 to 1881, daughter of Roseanna McCoy and Johnse Hatfield. She was born February 7th, 1881, and unfortunately she died in October of the same year, and it is said that she actually passed away, died of the measles. So, and I want to show you a view of the original stone there. You can tell that stone, the one that marks her grave, is a newer stone. I'm sure placed here by either family or historical groups or something like that. If you ever visit this area, there are a lot of sites to visit, and most of the time you can find a lot of this online, but different places throughout the communities there, you can find little brochures and go on a little bit of a driving tour. I'm going to show you, just like I mentioned before, just a couple of the sites that you can see in and around this particular area. And I have read that a lot of these unmarked graves in here are of other small children. So apparently this was used, sadly, for that. And Little Sally did not have a long life, but just with her parents being who they were, definitely made a huge impact. And can you imagine? I mean, we had two families that were embroiled in arguing and fighting for whatever reason. I'm not going to debate the reasons. We just know that there was some sort of feud that happened, obviously. But their romance occurred at the height of this feud. Now, can you imagine what a family scandal that this was on both sides of the family? But, you know, that's how love is. You know, it just happens, and, you know, it just so happened that the two that fell in love were from opposite sides of the feud. Just taking a few more looks at some of the grounds here, and you see a lot of simple stones in the cemetery, and most of these are unmarked graves. But we're going to take a look at a few of the marked graves in here. Other than little Sally, I think there were 3 other graves that actually had names on them that were marked. And this is Lewis McCoy, one of the names that we saw there. You can kind of take a look at the engravings there. It looks like he was born 1891, I believe. But yeah, Lewis McCoy. And all of the other marked graves in here were all McCoy families. And from what I'm gathering, this is on the farm of a gentleman named Uriah McCoy. And that Uriah McCoy house, although I'm sure it's been, well, obviously it's had some refurbishment done, but part of the original house, it was built from that. We're going to take just a slight look at that here in just a moment on our way back down the steps. But Uriah McCoy, from what I gather, this was his farm. And you'll see people do still come put some flowers on the graves, and this has become, you know, a destination that people will go to. You'll see the grave here of Erie McCoy. Erie McCoy passed away in 1940, and she is buried here along with her husband. His name is Thomas McCoy. We're going to take a look at the grave of Thomas McCoy right now. It appears that he passed away in 1955. Based on the research that I can find, that is the most recent grave in here, 1955. So this is an old cemetery. You're looking at some, you know, definitely some time that has passed since the last person was buried in this McCoy cemetery. So Lewis McCoy, Erie McCoy, Thomas McCoy, and of course little Sally were the only marked graves, unless there's something I just totally missed, were the only marked graves that I saw in here, plus several unmarked as well, which from what I'm gathering, from what I've read, are the graves of children. So what I want to do again is just show you all. I just want to make sure you see all the cemetery, and it really wasn't all that big. It was a small cemetery just on top of a little bank in this small community in Burnwell. And again, this is in Pike County. If you go over to Pikeville, which is not terribly far from here, you can see the graves of Randall McCoy and his wife, and actually Roseanna McCoy is buried there as well. Now you'll see going down these steps, that white house in the background was the old home place of Uriah McCoy, which I believe was the father of Thomas McCoy, the grave that we just visited, the one I talked about that passed away in 1955. But if you are ever in this area, this is a magnificent piece of history, and I can't recommend it enough. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I do have a little bonus to bring you. This is just a small part of a complicated story between these two feuding families. I'm actually going to take you to the site of the home of Randall McCoy, as well as the old well that was used by the McCoy family and is still standing on the grounds. So let's go ahead and go take a look at the site of the home of the McCoy family and the well of Randall McCoy. And I promised you some bonus footage, and here we are. We are at the Randall McCoy well, and you can actually see the original well here from Randall McCoy, and this is where his home was. And from what I read too, this statue was carved from reclaimed wood from the farm in which he lived. So this is very beautiful grounds, and the owner of the home here was just such a wonderful man and very welcoming, and gave us a ton of history on the Hatfield McCoy feud. Definitely stop here if you get the chance. And the old home place set right here. So if you are interested in Hatfield McCoy history, this is it. And here's the well. One thing that I noticed about the well is it surprised me looking down in there. You can't really tell it from the video so much, but that water was so clear down in that well. So very neat. The original well that the famed leader Randall McCoy used on his farm. Now, I also took a video of this McCoy Cemetery. This has a lot of history with the McCoy family, including the 3 boys that were executed. But unfortunately, the owner doesn't like company, apparently. Otherwise known as the Forbidden McCoy Cemetery. So I would have loved to have been able to get up in there and visit that cemetery, but for whatever reason, we cannot get there. But hope you enjoyed the visit. And again, I want to take another look, show you all the gravesite and the cemetery, the McCoy Cemetery in Burnwell, that has the final remains of little Sally, the daughter of Johnse Hatfield, Roseanna McCoy. And again, if you ever get the chance to visit, I would definitely recommend doing it. I am going to leave links in the description where you can find me, Facebook, Instagram, my merchandise store. Also, if you haven't subscribed, I do videos like this all the time. My channel is 100% cemetery related. I ask that you please join me, subscribe, and I will see you all again soon.